Welcome to Don't Give Up on Testicular Cancer, a podcast where testicular cancer survivors, caregivers, and others who have navigated the cancer journey share their stories. The podcast comes to you from the Max Mallory Foundation, a nonprofit family foundation focused on educating about testicular cancer in honor and in memory of Max Mallory, who died in 2016 at the young age of 22 from testicular cancer. Had he survived, Max wanted to help young adults with cancer. This podcast helps meet that goal. Here now is your host, Joyce Lofstrom, Max's mom and a young adult cancer survivor.
So with me today is Teri Price, and Teri is the executive producer of a 30-minute film titled Falling to the Cracks, Greg's Story, which was released in 2018. Her brother, Greg Price, an engineer, pilot, and athlete, died of complications after testicular cancer surgery in 2012 in Canada. A review of his case found missed faxes, follow-ups, and botched data sharing, ultimately costing this vibrant 31-year-old Alberta man his life. All of the missteps in his case took 407 days from his first diagnosis until he died. Now, Teri is fighting to improve the system, which she says not only failed her brother, but keeps failing to change. So, Teri, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited for this conversation and excited to have the opportunity to learn more about what you're doing and chat a bit about what we're doing.
Right. So tell us, let's just start like I always do with this story, what happened with Greg and anything you want to share.
Sure. Yeah. So my brother was a mechanical engineer. He was somebody who loved a challenge. He'd been pretty healthy his whole life. He was still playing sports and actually helping coach at the time of his death. And he also had his private pilot's license. So sort of the first, what we kind of consider the beginning of his journey is during one of his, he had to do a pilot's medical exam every 5 years. And it was at one of those appointments where there was a flagging of a thickening of the epididymis. They did some sort of normal basic tests after that appointment that didn't come back with any red flags. And so they just kind of left it, a bit of the no news is good news approach. And then Greg's had a rash on his foot about 8 or 9 months later, which triggered Greg to go back to the doctor and try and figure out. And Greg actually wasn't considered or wouldn't have been considered a member of this doctor's patient panel, or like that doctor was officially Greg's family doctor. But Greg did have a good relationship with him and trusted him and managed to get an appointment. So went back and saw the same physician again about this rash on his foot. And the physician checked his notes and must have checked Greg as well, and ended up sending a referral just down the hall to a general surgeon to do a little bit more of an investigation, because I think the symptoms hadn't resolved at that point. And so, yeah, that was about 8 or 9 months into Greg's journey in the healthcare system. That referral took a while. It was expected to be like the family physician thought it would be a couple of weeks. It ended up being more like 3 months. And during that time, Greg started developing back pain and decided to go to a walk-in clinic that was convenient, sort of on his way to where he was commuting for work. And so they started doing some investigation into the back pain. And eventually, after some tests, he got a referral to a urologist, which there was delays in getting that appointment as well. And sort of, I think in the end, there was 3 or 4 urologist referrals that were in the mix. But eventually, Greg did get an appointment and through most of this time, he was navigating all of this on his own. Greg, like I said, he was somebody he was pretty intelligent, confident. He was 30 years old at the time. I fully believe that he wanted to know what the plan was before he shared what was going on with his family and friends. He did share with my parents the night before the the urology appointment, and they went with him to that appointment, which was on a Monday morning. He had surgery on Wednesday, went into the emergency room because he was in a lot of pain and had swelling and a few symptoms that were concerning, went into the emergency room, but was sent home and ended up dying of a blood clot in my parents' home the next morning. So the whole experience was really, the experience for us was really just that final week. And after Greg died, we really wanted to understand what happened. We had at that point had very little experience with the healthcare system, made a lot of assumptions about how it worked, assuming it would work, that we could trust it and that it was safe and all of the things that you want to believe about the healthcare system. And so when Greg died, we really wanted to understand what happened and if there was things that we could do to help to prevent it from happening again to other patients and families. And I guess that was sort of the beginning of our, as a family, our journey into the sort of advocacy and trying to support change in the healthcare system.
Well, you've been through a lot, Teri, with all of that. It's unbelievable to me to listen to what happened. And what was the biggest challenge as you all went through this? I mean, it went on for more than a year. So,
yeah. And I think, yeah. And sort of like I mentioned for us, Greg was, looking back in hindsight, there was signs that Greg was struggling through some of this. He had a very high pain tolerance. But in the sort of last couple of months, like his birthday's at the beginning of April. And I remember on his birthday, really recognizing how much pain he was in. But because he was an athlete and still he would get up crazy early to go to the gym and stuff. So just automatically assumed that his back pain was related to overdoing it at the gym. And we had been asking him about appointments and trying to make sure that he was getting it checked out, and he was trying to get appointments and get those investigations done, but there was significant gaps in between when he was able to get in to get some of the diagnostic tests done and getting some then other appointments to get the reports reviewed and share information and find out what the next step was. There was all kinds of gaps for him in that whole journey. And so, but for a family, I think the hardest for us was really, especially in the early days after Greg died, is really trying to get some questions answered and to get an understanding of what happened. The healthcare system's reaction to things to harm in general is quite defensive. And you sort of got lots of the pat on the head kind of, it's complicated, you don't understand it, don't worry, we're doing investigations and we'll make the changes that need to be made to prevent this from happening again. But that wasn't really what we wanted at the time. We wanted to get that deeper understanding of what happened. And so it wasn't, unfortunately for us, it was probably a few months after Greg died that we were introduced to, it's an organization that's called the Health Quality Council of Alberta. So they sort of monitor and gather data and experiences in the healthcare system in the quality and safety sort of area of focus or realm in the sector. And that team ended up doing an investigation, which really for us was what we needed at the time. It's been incredibly impactful and important for our family to have gone through that investigation along with the team. We were invited into the room and our input was respected. And I think they knew that they needed to hear from us to really understand the full context of what happened. And I think it was from day one, at least for me personally, the initial interaction with that team was sort of, we knew right away that was where we wanted to sort of focus our energy and spend our time with that team. It was felt different from day one and was incredibly important and has been the foundation of what we've done since. Really is from the beginning with that investigation and then everything that's sort of come after as well.
Well, you're lucky to have a team like that. That had to make a huge difference. I know with a couple of things you were saying, it seems like when someone well, I'll just say when Max died, everyone just disappeared. There
Yeah.
was nobody there. Nobody would talk or come in, or it was just over, and I get it to somewhat why they may do that, but I also think for patients and their families, it's excruciating, and it's amazing that experiences are similar no matter where that is. It seems, at least the people I've talked to.
Yeah.
And just chasing information. I mean, I understand and I agree, but I wanted to ask this group then that you had investigate Greg's case, or they offered to. So did that kind of just continue and lead you to the film? Is that how you got there?
Yeah. So the lead investigator, or the person who was leading the team who did the investigation, is a physician that's based here in Calgary, where I am. And he's also on faculty at the Cummings School of Medicine, which is the medical school here at the University of Calgary. And I think after the release of the report, it was probably a couple years later that Ward came to us. He wanted to be able to share Greg's story when he was teaching the importance of teamwork and patient safety to the medical students. And we were excited about the idea and the potential to have an impact on the next generation of doctors. We've sort of felt from the beginning that there needs to be a bit of shift in culture, and thought that being able to share Greg's story and have open discussion might be one way to shift that culture. So we sort of gave the go ahead to Ward and wanted to contribute to that project in any way that we could. I think Ward, and at the beginning, we probably thought it'd just be a series of little video clips that could be shared in the classroom. But when Ward reached out to his network, he was introduced to Andrew Reggett and Becky Shaw, who ended up writing the script for us. And Andrew and Becky had worked a number of times with a director named Dean Bennett, who he was the director of the Heartland TV show that's on CBC, or on our Canadian television network. It's a fairly popular sort of family Sunday after evening family show. And so once we had Dean on board, we were able to recruit a really professional cast and crew, which helped us pull off the quality of film that we ended up producing, the Falling Through the Cracks film, which is, it's just a 30-minute dramatization of Greg's journey through the healthcare system. And for me, on day one of shooting, some of the crew just showed me some stills of what we had captured that day. And I remember thinking that there was high potential for it to be used well, like beyond the medical school classroom. And that really has been our experience for the last, I guess it's been 7 years since we had the final version of the film. And it's fully embedded into a few different medical schools here in Canada, and some additional sort of health profession programs as well. There's a few different nursing schools. There's a few schools using it for interprofessional education, which we love because it's another opportunity to really reinforce that message of teamwork that we think is critically important. And yeah, it's just been, the film has really allowed us to amplify the messages that we started with after the investigation. But it's so much easier to sort of be able to walk into a room or join a meeting, be able to hit play on the film and have the film tell the story for us, and then be able to participate in a discussion after the film, to both hear people's reactions and questions, but also to learn from them what they're excited about or frustrated with. That discussion after the film is I think really important, but it's also really valuable for us.
Well, when I watched the film, I mean, it's really well done. I mean, you can tell that the professional,
Yeah.
the acting experience and just the writing, the whole thing, it really tells the story. And I think what you just said about it being embedded into some of the medical schools and different health education settings for professionals, that's what testicular cancer needs. I mean, it needs that awareness, and with doctors and anybody caring for, men that come in with it. And I think that's wonderful to be able to reach that many people practicing, but also the new generation of people coming up, to treat. So that's kudos to your family and the team that did all that. So now I know you've been showing that, you said it's been 7 years. And I think I read you've shown the film 600 times in that period, which is amazing.
Yeah, we just had our last one for 2024, and I think it was 680th screening.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and we've joined almost all of those screenings. There was a handful that we sort of, because it was a series of screenings, and we joined the first number of them and would pop in when we were available. But besides that specific series of screenings, we've pretty much joined every other time that the film has been shown. Again, it's partially because we want to be able to respond to questions in here, but we also learn a lot from people, and it helps us stay sort of up to date on what's happening in the system and be able to be more confident, because both my dad and I get pulled into different committees and sort of task forces and are asked to share our experiences and what we've learned. And I think at least for me, and I don't think Dad would disagree, but that being able to continuously have conversations with people is really important in being able to be sort of to adequately contribute to those committee settings and stuff as well.
Yeah, and I think a couple thoughts too, just of our conversation. One is I was just going to comment on the back pain, because Max had that too, and you kind of think, oh, like with your brother, he's an athlete. Max wasn't, but who knows? You pulled something, lifting up, whatever, and you just kind of ignore it. And I think that it is a good thing to emphasize for the doctors, but also for any men that watch this or their families. It's a really kind of basic fact of life to have back pain, but what else goes along with it? And that's just the other thing I thought too is just, and I experienced this with Max, was the challenge of getting the doctors to work together like a team, because he did high dose chemo and there were doctors there, but there were neurologists there, and, the whole other team, and they didn't bring him in. And that's one thing I questioned when he died, was like, why didn't you? Because his tumor was in his brain, and it's just to me, as a observer or as a patient advocate or as a sister and a mom, it seems so obvious. Like, why don't you do this? I mean, I know medicine, there's many layers that I don't know about, but I think you bring that out really well in the film as well. So.
Yeah, we really do believe that teamwork is something that should be like part of a solid foundation of the healthcare system and should be embedded in the culture, and that we need the sort of systems and incentives and all of those additional levers that you can pull in the system to enable teamwork, because sometimes I think it's just not really seen as a really valuable skill or part of some of the professions that teamwork is really sort of held up to the same level as some of the other skills that they're probably taught in medical school or in any of the training. And sometimes it's also really hard to work effectively as teams, especially when you're talking about teams that aren't sort of co-located or the same clinic or the same unit. And for patients with a significant diagnosis or complex diagnosis, it does require people if we really want to prevent patients from falling through the cracks and for safe care to be possible, we have to make it possible for the healthcare workforce to work effectively as teams. And that's one of the reasons why sort of access to information is one of our priorities in addition to teamwork, because we fully believe that if you can't communicate or share information effectively across the patient's team, so from the patient perspective, who they're interacting with and who's on their team, if they can't communicate and share information, it's a patient safety risk. Yeah. And you see that in the film, like even the information of the thickening of the epididymis, which was sitting in one electronic medical record of the physician that Greg went to because of his pilot's medical, and the information around back pain was sitting in a different electronic medical record because he went to the walk-in clinic that was on his way to work. If those two pieces of information were in the same place or accessible by the people that were trying to care for Greg, we've been told, and I fully believe it's true, that connection to testicular cancer would have been made earlier than it was. They went through a number of different diagnosis tests and investigations on back pain that probably would have been different if they had known about the sort of thickening of the epididymis, which is what was flagged in the EMR of that very first appointment.
Yeah, that whole topic of sharing data and interoperability among electronic health records is a big issue in the US as well. It's not happening the way it needs to. And yeah, you're right. It leaves out a lot of key information that doctors need to know. And sometimes as patients, you assume that it's there and it's not. And yeah, we could have a whole nother, 5 hours on that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just, it's such basic information like that. Anyway, we're trying to work on it too in the US, I know, but I know your family too was really instrumental in just trying to help Greg, and that was shown in the film too. And can you just talk about that kind of support within your family? I mean, it sounds like you do have a great family, but just that support they provided to him.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, even though he didn't share throughout the whole, especially the first sort of 10 months of, actually more than that, more like a year, that exactly what was going on. I mean, there's 5 kids in my family. I have an older brother, a younger brother, and a sister, in addition to Greg, and had a couple of nephews and a niece at the time that have now we have 5 nephews and 2 nieces, and we're close, and grew up in rural Alberta on the farm, sort of. That Greg loved the rural community life. When he was coaching with my dad and brothers, the community baseball team. And so sort of those kind of like typical rural values was definitely part of our life growing up. And Greg we were lucky. And Greg was super intelligent and would have been able to tap into really any resources he needed, which I think that also is one of the reasons why very early on we took on sort of the challenge of trying to advocate for change in the healthcare system. Because if Greg couldn't navigate his way through the system, I don't know how anybody navigates their way through the system, because he really did have so many things, like sort of strengths that could have and should have helped him in the system, and he still fell through the cracks. And so it is a very significant red flag. It's a reflection of the gaps in the system, and I think some of those gaps are even bigger for other people as well. And we need to have a system that can be dynamic and adaptive and recognizes how complex the system is. And I think our family, partially because probably sort of that problem-solving rural farmer mentality, also at the family business is sort of in agriculture and food. And so understanding some systems and how all of the systems that are in place to make sure that food is safe is also very much embedded in our daily lives. And my professional background is in disaster and emergency management. And I was actually working in the energy industry at the time and got exposure to the safety systems in the energy industry. And so when we were learning more about the healthcare sector after Greg died, it was shocking for a lot of our family, I think, to really recognize where the safety culture is quite a bit behind other industries in healthcare for a number of different reasons. But you sort of mentioned assumptions around access to information and who can see information and some of those things. We fully made a lot of assumptions about the healthcare system prior. Access to information is one of them. We fully assume that information sort of followed the patient around, and it doesn't, not necessarily, not consistent enough to be confident in it. And the safety culture and the safety systems in healthcare was another place where we fully assumed that it would be at least as robust as the other industries we had exposure to, and it's really not. And so that was a bit shocking, but I think it's also sort of that systems mindset, that safety mindset that our family has brought into the conversation when we are talking about what we want to see in the future of the healthcare system, that has contributed to this, to sort of the path that we're on as well, and what we've been able to accomplish so far.
I just, the sharing of information is it's not there. And you mentioned faxes as one of the things that I know in the US, and just from my own background with doing public relations for a health IT organization, they get lost. They're never delivered. They're sent to the wrong person. Whatever mistake you want to think about, it can happen with a fax. And hopefully that's a change that is happening in the US as well as with what you're doing in Canada, because it just doesn't work. I mean, and
yeah,
I've interviewed people when I was working full time at this job, and it's just awful, how things just, like your title, fall through the cracks because nobody ever got the information. So
yeah, no, for sure. And there's so much around like the assumptions that it's just going to work.
Right.
And not necessarily being able to take that step back and say, okay, are we actually setting ourselves up for success in the kind of care and the kind of systems we want to have in healthcare? And just the fax machine, there's just so many flaws with it. It's not as reliable as we need it to be. It's really a one-way communication. We know from having conversations with lots of people in clinics that still have to rely on the fax machine, how much extra work they do because the fax exists, because they end up calling ahead and calling to confirm and doing all of these extra things because they don't have a really effective, reliable way to be able to communicate and share information. And so it is one of those things that I wish we broadly could take that step back and think about, okay, well, if we're trying to work effectively as teams with patients and families, what is the best tool that we could possibly use or design that would enable us to communicate and share information effectively? And I think sort of the faxing a referral letter through is not what people would come up with now. And it's one of the things in the interoperability conversation as well that we're really recognizing, and it's not actually even that new, but that it's not really a technology issue. It's more the implementation and a change management and that shift in culture and the shift in workflows that need to happen in order to get rid of the fax machine and be looking for the kind of opportunity in adopting better technology that can actually help us accomplish what we want, what lots of people get into healthcare to do and in caring for patients.
Yeah, I think the shift in mindset and culture is a big part of it, because until people are willing to do it, it's going to be very hard to implement. And again, it's not another one of those basic things. It's like, what, why can't you just, but that's me as an outsider, saying that. But
yeah, no, for sure. We starting to get a little bit of a better understanding of some of the issues, but it still doesn't change just because we get a better understanding of why there's the pushback in the dynamics. And sometimes it's a lack of trust, or it's the amount of change that people have to and even the perception of change or the mindset around change, that is a barrier as well. But like when we show the film and there's members of the public in the audience, it's quite often people are just like, when did this happen? Like, they're not still using fax machines, right? And it's just like, yeah, no, they're definitely still using fax machines. And we've had multiple experiences as a family where even after massive investments in the province here in new technology and moving to an EMR that's implemented throughout the province, still having to follow up and like I had a nephew that broke a bone, and the referral into the clinic just went nowhere. Nobody knows what happened to it, but because my brother knows that he has to check and make sure, he was calling and making sure. Plus, I mean, it's a teenage boy with it was his hip, so you need to make sure you was concerned that it would have long-term impacts on him as he's growing if it wasn't dealt with in timely, appropriate way. So anyway, there's it still happens all the time. Unfortunately, I wish we would stop hearing these stories, but every single time we show the film, there's people sharing their own experiences, both from the professional perspective and from the patient perspective, because that's also one of the things that I've realized over the last number of years is how challenging and frustrating and how it causes so much burnout in the health workforce as well, because they know that these gaps exist and either have to pretend that they don't or do a whole bunch of extra effort, or they've tried a number of times to spark some kind of change and it's got like stopped for some reason. They ran into some kind of wall, and I can imagine how frustrating it is for them as well.
Well, I know in the U.S. a couple of things. One is I use the patient portal a lot in my electronic health record, and that they will say, if you put a question in here, it might take 2 days for us to respond and call us if it's urgent, which I've done that and have done both. But I mean, if you use it and have access to one, that's a good alternative, I think. But that's a couple of big ifs there. Not everybody is comfortable with technology and want to use it. But the other thing in the film I noticed, and I think it's true in any case, but especially like a cancer diagnosis, is to listen to the patient and listen to what that person is asking or saying is going on, like the blood clot scene in the ER with Greg, and it was like, oh no, just go home, you'll be fine. And it's that kind of dismissal. I mean, that happened a couple of times with Max, but it's happened to me too. And you just have to keep going, you being the patient. And that's where like advocacy, your family came in, our family with Max, or yourself. I mean, you really, really have to stand up to what you're feeling or thinking. And it's uncomfortable to do it. I mean, it is, but it makes a difference if you do. So,
yeah, for sure. And I think that is one of the reasons why, and again, it was something we didn't recognize as being super critical before, but know now how critical it can be to have family or a loved one or somebody else there. It's really hard to speak up for yourself as a patient for a whole number of reasons, but as a family member, being a little bit asking the question a couple more times, or asking for information, or just speaking up and saying that this isn't normal for your loved one, can be incredibly important. And we need to make sure that we're including family members as when we talk about teamwork, there's sort of a teamwork framework that we use. And we include patients and families as members of the team. When we're talking about how do we create the conditions for effective teamwork, we have to be thinking about how do we include patients and families in that. And when I'm saying families, I mean whoever the patient wants to include, their loved ones and caregivers, whichever sort of terminology you want to use. But the patient should, because that should be seen as somebody who's valuable additional member of the team, not somebody that's sort of a burden or in the way or is going to take up extra time. Because I think there's lots of times where they're catching things or seeing a deterioration that nobody else on the team is going to notice.
So what's next for you with the film? Are just showing it, or version 2 or anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking to kind of think about how fast the last 7 years of using the film has gone. I think when we first started talking about what sort of our distribution plan of the film was going to be, I kind of thought we'd do a few months where we would directly be involved in showing the film. And then we would kind of set other people up for being able to host screenings of the film, with the long-term plan being that you could just watch it online. And we've never really moved past that first phase of being involved in the film in every screening when the film is shown. And it's partially because we see the impact the film can have and really think that the discussion after is important. It's both important for learning, but it's also, the film can be quite frustrating to watch. And for some people, it can be very triggering as well. And so those emotions that can be hard and are a bit negative are not the impact that we want the film to have. But that being said, we are also recognizing now that we are a bit of a bottleneck for being able to actually see and access the film. We do host completely open to the public monthly live streams. So that's an opportunity for anybody, including audience, to be able to sign up and see the film. But we're trying to sort of think through how we might be able to still or have audiences watch the film and kind of experience the same as what they do when they're having a live conversation with us, but being able to navigate through because now that we've done so many screenings, we know what the common themes are, what some of the very common questions are in different areas where people kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into topics. And so I think we're starting to explore whether or not it's possible to set it up so that you could access it online and then dive into some of these themes and topics and stuff. And I think we're just trying to figure out exactly how to do that. And we will probably focus on that first audience of the post-secondary institutions and have them host screenings themselves with students. And because they're already kind of trained, not kind of, they are trained in facilitation and can have those conversations with their students as part of a class. And then thinking that we'll sort of continue to spread and open it up as we refine it, because I'm sure there's going to be things that we're not thinking of now that will be sort of learned as we go through enabling people to watch it online. So yeah, it'll be a bit phased where we'll have it set up so that people can host screenings of the film, really targeting post-secondary first, but we're not necessarily going to restrict it. And then eventually the plan would be to have it so that people could sort of navigate through, watch it, and be able to navigate through some of the content. And hopefully the plan is to make it interactive, because that's another thing that is a bit of a gap on the approach so far is, I mean, we remember different things from the different conversations. Sometimes they're recorded, but not always. And so we haven't really been capturing the conversations in a way that we can do any kind of real analysis on it. Okay. And I think that having an online platform where people are kind of choosing what they want to dive deeper into, can sort of share their reactions and questions in the online platform, might also enable us to learn a little bit more from audiences. Because the other thing is, we rely on the audience to speak up themselves. And there's always people who are quiet. If I was on the other side of the other side of the room or the screen, I would probably be one of the people that are quiet. That's my personality. And so we're missing potential insight from people who aren't speaking up in the sessions, that we might be able to capture some of that from people as well. And then the other aspect of it is trying to figure out if there's ways that we can effectively capture people's stories. I've always hesitated a bit about doing that so far, because I want to be able to, if we're asking somebody to share a story with us, I want to be able to be very clear and transparent about what we're going to do and what the value of doing that is. I know sometimes people just want to share their stories, but I just want to make sure that we're really respecting and doing the best we can when people are taking that step of sharing stories with us. And I think we might be able to, again, gain some insight and themes and some of that from the stories that are shared with us, and use them in a way that might be able to spark change as well.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's very, I guess, ethically thought through, which I think is important, because people don't always think that way, it's good on your part. If people want to watch it now with the setup, we'll still be doing the monthly screening. Can you give us a link where they should go to sign up?
Yeah. So through our website, which is just gregswings.ca. And then I think there's a link right on the home page to the next screening. But I think the link is just gregswings.ca/events. And that'll have the links for all of that. And we will continue it's going to take us a while before we're at the point where people can just navigate and find the film independently online anyway. But even beyond that, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to do the monthly screenings. And we still will always be excited to join any session where people want to invite us in for a conversation, because again, it is another opportunity for us to learn. I'm just hoping that by also having this platform will be sort of additional spread of the film and additional learning for us. It's not that we're completely eliminating what the opportunity to host us with the film.
So,
And that, will be true in the meantime and true in the long run.
okay. I didn't ask you about Greg's Wings. What goes on with that project? So.
Yeah. So Greg's Wings Projects is the name of the organization that we created in honor of Greg. The sort of final trigger for us to decide, we were always trying to figure out how we wanted to honor Greg. And I think the idea of the film, and also the sort of desire to have control on the film and own the film and help contribute to that project, was the reason why we created the organization. So it's a not-for-profit organization that's based here it's actually registered in Acme, which is the small town where we're from in Alberta, but it is just a not-for-profit organization that owns the film and is doing we have the themes that we overall want to do that are in areas where things that Greg was passionate about, and we try and sort of follow his mantra in what we're doing. And we sort of go where the opportunity and the momentum pops up. And right now it really is these conversations in health and trying to have an impact in healthcare, and with the priorities that we have within that healthcare bucket is around that sort of strong foundation of teamwork, the access to information. And then the third one, which is really because we recognize that our experience with the Health Quality Council and that experience with the investigation is quite unique, and we don't think it should be. So the third one is really around sort of healing after harm and how do we learn when things go wrong. It's focusing on that bucket and really emphasizing how incredibly important it was for us, but also trying to spread the message that it shouldn't be unique.
So this seems like a full-time job for you. Is it a full-time job?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I don't think I fully anticipated that it would be at the outset, but it is, both sharing the film and then some of the additional committee work that's associated with it, and thinking about the strategy for the organization overall, especially going into next year with some of these sort of the next big project for Greg's Wings being this platform and sort of the sharing of the film 2.0 that will take up. It's a full-time job.
Yeah. It's great. It's so many layers and details but that makes the quality of it what it is. So my last question is, what song, when you hear it, you have to sing along? We're going to just end with a smile, right?
Yeah. I am an awful singer. I do not sing in public at all. I probably know lots of lyrics to songs, but I'm awful at like the artists and the titles. Probably the only time that I would ever actually sing is like by myself in the car.
Yeah.
I mean, right now it's probably mostly Christmas music and the classic sort of Christmas music and those lyrics. But yeah, I'm not somebody that stands up and does karaoke or has a like top 10 list that I can just rattle off of my favorite songs, even though I do enjoy music. I have a lot of respect for the people that are very skilled, and it's just not the like titles and lyrics. And for some reason, it's not something that I retain really, really well.
I get that. That's okay. I
Yeah.
can't sing either, and I rarely sing anywhere in the car, but yeah, I get
it. In the car, on the tractor lawnmower, when I think that nobody else can hear me.
Well, that's good. Christmas music, I've been playing. We have one radio station here I turn on. It's all Christmas. So, it's kind of fun.
It's that time of year.
I like the instrumental actually more sometimes than the voice.
Me too when I'm working. Yeah, because I get so I don't know why. Like I say, I don't know all the lyrics, but apparently the lyrics completely distract me from working. I can't have them. But anyway, yes.
Gregorian chant is good too. I turn that on a lot when I work.
Yeah.
So
well,
but thanks for all this time and insight, Teri. It's been great, and maybe you can come back down the road when you've made some updates or the things you talked about. It'd be great to talk again in a year or something.
Yeah, for sure. No, as we run through some of this development and because the other thing with this platform, like we sort of have our thoughts around some of these themes, but the like content and diving deeper into these themes, like we are not experts in a whole bunch of this stuff. So we're going to rely on other people to be able to fill in the blanks on specific topics, and having real experiences is so valuable for people. And so being able to link into the work that you've done and all of the experiences that people have shared with you around their testicular cancer diagnosis and journeys and all of that could be something that would be really valuable to point to as well as we're going through this. Because that's sort of the idea I have in my head right now, is really kind of curating some of the content, not necessarily creating all of it.
No,
Because there is a lot that's out there that is actually good, but sometimes it can be hard to find, or in the moment you're so overwhelmed. If we can help point to some experiences and experts and people that are working on exciting things, because that's the other angle that we try to be careful with. We really don't want to be sort of us versus them in the system. We want it to be contributing together, and we don't want to just rant and complain about the system. We also want to be pointing to the things that are working.
Right.
So anytime that, and hopefully have that spread, because that spread and scale is something that healthcare and quite often Canada gets referenced, at least internally, as the country of pilot projects, where we have good innovation things that pop up, but it doesn't spread across the country. There's reasons why, but when we can like point to things and hopefully get people to learn from each other in a positive way, that we want to be able to do that too. So yeah, staying in touch and being able to check back in, and do not hesitate to reach out.
It'll be more sooner than a year. I was just podcast. But no, you're doing great things, and I just glad you could share all that with us. So thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Don't Give Up on Testicular Cancer. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to our program on your favorite podcast directory. You can also visit the Max Mallory Foundation at www.maxmalloryfoundation.com/podcast to listen to previous podcast episodes or donate to the foundation. Join us again next time for another episode of Don't Give Up on Testicular Cancer.